welcome to the podcast. This show is entirely dedicated to the wisdom and the stories of people embracing their true and extraordinary nature, of overcoming, breaking through limits, tapping into universal wisdom, and hopefully inspiring you to do the same. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Today I have a very special guest, Rae-Ann Chawla, right? Am I saying it right?
Yep, that's right.
And we were actually friends. We worked together back in our days at the Y. So this is how we got connected. And I've always felt like a sense of like connection to you. I feel like we have similar energy, similar interests sometimes. So we've always been connected. And Rae-Ann has went through a journey of infertility. And I really think your story is amazing because you've went through so many different channels and you did so much work that I would really love for you to share with everyone, this coming up story, the way that your healing journey has taken place, because I know a lot of people really struggle with that. And when someone finds a path, it's like definitely worthy of sharing. So welcome, Rae-Ann. I'm super happy to have you. After trying to plan several times, we finally made it. And yeah, I'd love for you to introduce your story and take us on your journey.
Great. Thank you so much, Kayla. I'm so happy that we were able to do this as well. I finally were able to make it happen. Yeah, I just felt compelled. I was actually having a conversation with Michelle a few months before you and I had ever brought this to fruition. And I was like, I almost feel like if I were to do an episode with Kayla, I'd really want to talk about my infertility journey. And Michelle was like, oh my gosh, I just got chills. You have to do that. So ever since her and I had that conversation, I've just been like, this is something that I want to do. And it's something that I want to make happen. And I just love how supportive you were of the process to get here, of being like, it's going to happen. It's just in divine timing, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
Appreciate that. So yeah, I know that I'm compelled to talk about this because it brought me through so many different healing journeys just in life, right? At no point was it ever just about the infertility. It was about my life as a whole and more of a holistic approach to healing and working through my traumas and things. So I think that's why I'm compelled to talk about this. And I know there's a lot of people who struggle with infertility, and it's always a question mark. You never know if you're going to be that person that doesn't have kids or does have kids. And so I'm not here to disclaim that it will happen for you if you follow these steps, right? Like, who am I to say that? But I think just the power in the healing process for me is what freed me from like the earthly bounds of the trauma and what have you.
I love that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like when Vishal and I got married, we got married in July 2018. We're actually there on our wedding day, helping out and stuff. A lot of family that knows both of us knows we both have always wanted to be parents. And before we got married, like people would like make fun of us because we're like, our number is like 4, 6, like this huge family. And we've always just felt this beauty in I guess, being surrounded by family and kids, right? And just always wanting that. And so it was like an ongoing joke leading up to our wedding that 9 months after we got married, there'd be a baby. And so, and we didn't really put pressure on ourselves initially. Of course, you don't know that this is going to be an issue until it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was like days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months. And it just wasn't in the cards for us at that time. And so we went through we went through 3 different specialists, and we initially went through our family doctor. We did a lot of different treatments, and things just weren't playing out the way that we had expected them to. So in that, things just got a little bit messy for me, I would say. Vishal has always just had like this conviction, like knowing, it's going to happen for us. And for me, it was really just a big question mark. Like I had said earlier, like I don't know if I have the conviction that he has to say that I know this is going to happen for us. And so throughout all the treatments and whatnot, there was never anything that was ever diagnosably wrong with me medically. Everything looked good on paper. They did all the tests that they could do. Everything looked good in every single test that they had done. And it's just that I wasn't conceiving. And then I would say about a year and a half in, 2 years in, we actually did conceive, but we had experienced a loss, and that had happened a couple more times, throughout the years. And so it kind of led, like in April in 2019, I started working at Settlement Services. And as I got to know you better, you were talking about, one day you had just come up to the area that I was working in. You were like, you know what? I'm working on learning the Akashic Records. And like, you were showing me the paperwork, and I was like, this is so cool. Like, this is so cool that I actually know somebody who's going to be, capable of doing this and is like trying to do it. And I thought that action of that conversation from you is what opened up this entire world of, I don't know what the right word is for me, but in my context, in my vocabulary, I would say of spirituality. And for me, that's okay, right? But I know that after we had those initial conversations, you were talking about how you were going to learn that and take that on. You had actually went through a session in hypnosis, and that was actually the first session, I guess, engaged in this type of area of things of spirituality. I'll just stick with that.
I forgot about the whole Christine thing. I'm excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it was the first thing where I was like, okay, if the doctors can't find out what's wrong with me, it's time to start looking for answers elsewhere if you're even going to get them, right? And in that session, it had unlocked like this, throughout that session with Christine, it kept coming up that I had like lost children in parallel, and I had lost my husband in parallel, and then I had lost more children in another parallel. And so it was just this constant fear of loss that lingered within me. I thought that was really eye-opening for me, because having had losses in this life, it made a lot of sense, right? I was constantly in fear of losing the pregnancies that I had. And then for this to come up in this session, well, it made too much sense to me, right?
Mm-hmm. And so when you were hypnotized, you went into basically like past lives or parallel lives, and seeing that you had like lost children and your husband there, right?
Yeah.
And did you feel like you were pulling that fear into this experience?
I do think I was. Yeah. I almost felt that there was a sense of guilt that I carried, and I never knew where it came from. Right. And so this kind of explained where that came from. And then going even further into a session that I believe that you had brought this up when I did my first Akashic Record reading, that I had lost a child, and I blamed myself for that loss in a parallel life. And so I think that's where the guilt stems from. And as a parent, I feel like it's natural to blame yourself for those instances, right? Mm. So yeah, I think that was the start to being open to exploring, my trauma and things that were affecting me, and only I had the power to change. And so it just became a part of my everyday life, I guess, at that point. I had started like engaging in like readings with Randy, and, it just opened up this whole world of like, this is what's going on and this is what you need to do. And, never really wanting to always listen to what's being told to you by the universe. Mm-hmm. I think we're all guilty of that at times, but throughout my journey, I actually unpacked a lot of the issues that I had with my family as well. And I'm sure I've said this to you even when we were first getting to know each other, like a lot of the times I would explain my relationship with my parents as just distant and almost non-existent at times. And it brought me to a point in my life where like my parents are like two of the kindest people you'd ever meet. They would never hurt anybody. They know what they did to us when we were younger, and they've asked for forgiveness. They've acknowledged all of that. And they still feel extreme guilt over the things that they've put us through. And so I felt like, who am I to like convict them for those things? It's only affecting me and not them in my personal life, right? And so I felt really compelled to unpack that. And every time to how I felt, particularly towards my parents, and how I was angry with them about how we were brought up, or a lack thereof, I guess. When I was about 20, my dad has like this love of Harley. So he used to like pick me up and take me for a Harley ride, right? And I was about 20. I was in town. I had lived in Edmonton at the time, and he told me he used to talk while I was on the back of the bike. You know, dad's like, he's never, now that he's older, he might talk to me face to face about emotional things, but it was more convenient for him while I was sitting on the back. So he said to me, he's like, I've always felt like you were running away. And he's like, I know that I played a role in that, but he's like, I just want you to understand why you're doing that. And it didn't seem pivotal at the moment, right? Like just a dad being a dad, you know, dad doesn't talk much, like it is what it is. But now, like every time I think about healing that anger within me that I had towards my parents, I always think of that moment. And I think with my dad, he did everything he could for us growing up. And he did the best with what he knew how to do. And same with my mom, like they both had very troubled upbringings as well. And so this is their first time, you know, parenting us and dealing with their trauma. And so I felt it was just a part of my journey. And I really don't believe I'd be the parent I am today to our daughter had I not experienced that healing with my parent. You know, I feel like there would be a lot of resentment and anger. And my daughter adores my parents. Like she absolutely loves them. She has great relationships with them. And I honestly feel that part of the healing that I went through is so that I didn't perpetrate those things onto her about my feelings for my parents. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I think it changed a lot for me and for a lot of other family members as well. Like, I think people can see that, you know, if their own children are willing to move past these things, I think any of us can, you know? And so it was a huge moment for me in healing the relationship with my parents and my siblings and other family members as well. I guess I was running away, but it was just me, you know? It wasn't anybody else. So yeah, there was
it's like interesting to like visualize how, you know, you wanted to bring like a next generation in and was like struggling to do so. And it honestly sounds like to me that things really shifted when you went back to heal like your own childhood trauma and like your almost your lineage, right? And sort of clean things up a little bit, practice that forgiveness. And then did it feel like that was when things changed in your infertility journey? Like when you did that kind of ancestral healing and did it feel like the slate was open for the next generation to arrive?
It honestly did. It's just months before we conceived our daughter, Abby. It just felt like it was just like the best way I can explain it is just like the calmest ocean, you know, like the sea was just like calm. And I was just like waiting for like, you know, like everything is as it should be, you know? And I hadn't felt that way since a very young age. And so feeling that calm and just like the months leading up to having her, I often like filled my life with a chaotic schedule, right? So that I didn't have to spend time and sit with myself. And in the months leading up to actually conceiving her, I actually got into like pulling oracle cards and tarot cards for myself, right? And it was like 2 weeks straight that I kept pulling the bear. And it's like, slow down, hibernate, you know? And I was like, no, that's just not who I am. Like I made overexerting myself in every aspect of my life. Like I wore it as a badge of honor. And so that was another thing that I had to like learn to stop doing and being like, I swear that prepared me for postpartum because life is so slow and it's just day by day. And someone who's always filled their schedule, you know, with 2, 3, sometimes 4 jobs, it really helped with becoming a new mom and just being patient and learning that it's okay to take rest sometimes, right?
That's huge. And even when I think about like the bear coming up too, like whenever I see the bear, it always feels like such a matriarchal, motherly energy, right? When you think about bears, I personally don't think about male bears out there just messing around. You think of the mama bear gonna fight you to protect her cubs, right?
Absolutely.
What an awesome omen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it's so wild how life like wants you to win if you just like listen for a minute and you just
Yes.
stop and you're like, how can I do this instead of, like fighting your way through it. And I feel I do the same. Like I've come a long way, but where you just fill your schedule so tight so that you don't have to do the healing or you don't have to think about your emotions. Like I definitely resonate with that in my previous days as well.
Yeah. You know, it was like weeks where I didn't listen. I'm like, maybe I'll get a different card today. And then I pull it and it's a bear. And like Vishal, like I'm sure I've shared, my husband, I'm sure I've shared this with you before, where he wasn't like against the idea of doing this stuff, but it wasn't for him. And so I was like, I need you to watch me pull this card today, because I pulled this bear so many times I'm going to scream. And he's literally sat in front of me, watched me pull the bear again. And he's like, I think you need to start listening to what these cards are telling you, right? And I was like, oh, whatever. And I just ignored it. Just getting the same messages in other areas of my life, the universe being like, you need to listen to us, right? So I decided to quit one job and keep the second part-time job while also having a full-time job. And the second part-time job, I was like, I can't leave. Like, these people are incredible. Like, I love working with them. And then in true fashion of the universe, they started like leaving, like leaving their job. So the universe is like, get out, bitch. I was like, oh, everybody's leaving, like, you know, and I didn't take it as a sign at that time. I was like, whatever, there'll be more people, there'll be good people, right? Like, not a big deal, like, you know. So, and then I actually ended up doing a hypnosis session with Michelle. And
for anyone who's wondering, Michelle actually was featured, I think, on episode 10, and she was the one with the near-death experience. So so we're all kind of connected as a cohort. So if you want to hear about Michelle's journey, go back a couple episodes and check her out.
Yeah, and she's amazing, and her journey is amazing. And I haven't caught up with her in a few months. I'm really missing her, but she's incredible. And so, yeah, I had done a session with her. And of course, like anybody who goes through the infertility struggles and having gone through it for years, anytime you're in a position to ask, you ask, right? So like towards the end of the session, it's March 2021. You know, everything just feels calm. It feels right. And so we had actually just stopped all of our treatments. We decided that we weren't going to do any treatment. We were 2 weeks out from having IVF, our IVF appointment. And so I was like, it's a perfect time to ask. So I asked, and they're like, this year. So if you think about the timeline of that, if I conceived a baby within the next 10 days, like, this is going to happen when I was in this session with Michelle. But my mindset was like, why couldn't it? Like, why wouldn't it? You know, like, why it can and it will. And so Michelle, just being, you know, the kindest person and like just the purest person you've ever met. She like comes to my house we meet up for coffee like a couple of days later, and she's like giving me all like these fertility idols, and she's like got all this stuff for me. She's like, put this in your room, put this here. She's got these little jars of like protection. She's like, put these around your house, and she's got all this stuff for me. I guess I've never like felt so supported by another human being in like at the purest form. And I was just so touched by her gesture. And like the only thing she didn't tell me was like how to actually conceive a baby. You know what I mean? But like I could tell she wanted to. She'd be like, Rae-Ann, this is what you need to do. But literally like 2 weeks after that, we found out that we were expecting Abigail. From that point forward, like we started telling people immediately, because having gone through the things that we've gone through, I personally don't feel that, this is my personal opinion, some people may feel differently about this, but losing a baby before 12 weeks and losing a baby after the 12 weeks, like I feel that there's absolutely no difference. And I want to share my joy, and I want to be real with people about what I'm experiencing, especially my close friends and family. And that's really who we only shared it with. But like, as soon as we had our first ultrasound, we were like 8 weeks, we started telling everybody in our family, and we're like, this is happening. This is a definite thing. Like, we're having this baby.
Wow.
And yeah. And so, never once through our pregnancy did either one of us doubt that it wouldn't happen, and just surrounded ourselves with like the positivity and the joy. Like, despite the struggles that we had while I was pregnant, we were just, I guess it was just a new lease on our perspective for mostly for myself, and having Vishal as such a supportive partner, and just going with whatever I said that we were doing, you know? So
It's so great.
yeah, it was incredible. And I am so happy that everything happened the way that it did. And, you know, you can't say that when you're in it. I know people who are in it right now. It's hard to say that you'd go through all that again. And I would never want to perpetrate that on myself either. But everything happened the way that it happened for me to be the best version of myself to raise my daughter. And for Vishal and I to be the best versions of ourselves in our marriage. We went through a lot of stuff together that some people don't make it through, right? So we're just so incredibly blessed to be where we are. And we're so happy that it was in the cards for us. It's not for everybody, but we just feel so blessed. So,
oh, like, you know, it's so nice to hear a story that has like a happy ending, right?
of course. Yeah.
And when you think back to, is there ever a moment that you were like, things are changing? Was there ever like a lightning bolt where you were like, this is something I need to focus on? Do you feel like it was like the bear card and you were like, I need to listen to this?
I would say initially no, but I think like when the universe was like, she's a stubborn bitch. And then they like, and my spirit guides were like, we need to like, you know, throw her around a bit. Then it was very obvious to me. And then I think it was just like the few weeks, like from January 2021 to March 2021, like those few months where I kept pulling these cards and it was the same thing over and over again. And then like having that session with Michelle, I think within those 3 months, I was like, this is it. Like, that's where I felt like this is where I've actually made the changes. You know, this is where I've actually healed. And this is where hopefully what I'm manifesting comes to fruition.
And if you were to give, like, for people listening that maybe are on this journey and they're hearing like, you know, the work that you've done, you know, what would you tell people to start with? Or, you know, what do you tell people if you were to give advice, like what's something to look at or focus on or do? And it sounds like self-healing would be probably the underlying theme, but you went through so many avenues. Like, what to you felt like a piece of wisdom you'd love to share with other people who might be struggling?
I think for me, like before I started healing, I often, I don't want to say that I played the victim, but I was the victim in a lot of my stories. And I had to change my perspective on that and look at it as if it doesn't matter who the victim is in this story. It matters who can move forward from this and break the generational traumas and who can heal from it. And if it's not going to be anybody before me or after me, like it's got to be me, you know? And so I think the best piece of advice I could give is that no matter how little or how much work you put in, one step forward is one step forward, and take it one day at a time. I'm not acting like this healing journey was like, you know, every day was a step forward. Of course, there's times where there's a bit of regression and you feel you're back at square one, and like, why, you know, you get back into the mentality of like, why is it me? Like, why does this have to happen to me? And so if you can just take it one day at a time and focus on yourself. And I think in part of that is having boundaries and making clear boundaries for yourself to protect yourself from other people, I guess, affecting your process, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of something you said earlier where you said like, you know, I'd went through these traumas or these experiences with my family and the only person who could deal with it was me. And whenever I, you know, if I see somebody, like I'm doing a session for someone and it talks about, you know, ancestral healing, people often think like they have to go and like work with their parents, work with their grandparents, do all this research. But when we're healing generational trauma, it actually just means to like heal it within yourself and like let go of those stories. And I think that's a key thing. I think like when I first started hearing about generational trauma, it sounded like the most impossible journey until you realize like you're the break in the chain and it's just like up to you and you have to just take the responsibility to like regenerate yourself from the places in which there was wounds coming through that lineage.
Absolutely. No, that's really profound what you said there. I actually agree with you. Absolutely.
And it just like takes the the weight off. And I think like, did you feel when you were, saying like, I felt like a victim to my circumstance, did you ever feel like you almost turned a blind eye? Like, I just kind of feel, not necessarily you, but I feel some people live in denial. They don't even necessarily acknowledge that they have some things they have to heal in their roots.
Absolutely. Some people that I love dearly that are very close to me struggle with that actually. And you're right. It's one thing to actually believe that there's an issue, or that there's something that needs to be worked on.
Mm-hmm. And it's like you can kind of run, but you can't always hide from what like spirit or the divine wants you to do before that new channel comes in.
Absolutely.
And especially like the world that we live in right now, it feels like there's a lot of really gifted children coming in, and they do maybe need parents to be at this really profoundly supportive, aware space in order to have the incarnation that they're searching for.
Absolutely.
Which is very cool.
That's actually amazing. So many thoughts running through my head right now. So many things that you've said that, I might not necessarily have thought of in the moment. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is very cool.
Yeah.
So do you feel like when you decided to go on this journey that the universe kept like supporting you or like leaving you breadcrumbs? Like was when you made the decision, do you feel like there was like support as you went through it?
Absolutely. It just kept coming up everywhere. Like everywhere in every aspect of my life, like, oh, like this, we go for coffee with you and Kayla, let's say, or sorry, you and Michelle, let's say. And it would just like bring up a new conversation of like, oh, there's this person, there's that person. And it was like, I was just being led to connect with the people that I was meant to connect to as part of this journey. And then within those people also just like from conversation picking up things that they're saying and being like, okay, this is speaking to you. This is something that you need to pursue, or this is something that you need to look into because there's a reason that you're in this moment and you're having this conversation with these people, So I feel I feel the universe was definitely leading me on this path, and I just needed to be more perceptive to the signs and whatnot.
I was gonna say like the magic of listening and like paying attention and being like, okay, I am gonna follow through with this. And maybe not like, the first conversation you had may not have had the final solution, but it like feels to me like it like opens up new doors, and then you kind of just follow this journey until you get to that destination or that goal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So is there anything else you wanted to share about your infertility journey?
No, just that, like I had said before, I don't want to like say that it's in the cards for all of us, but just taking it day by day and doing what you can. And if there's one thing that I could, improve from my experience, it would be that if you can take it day by day and live more presently instead of focusing on what it is you're trying to achieve, because I did that for many, many days. And there were months and months where I felt like I was just moving through the motions of life. And I truly feel that I could have been living my life while working through these problems, just to be able to experience things as a young person who's newly married, and I think I deprived myself of that, just being focused on what the goal was and not getting to that goal. So definitely if you're struggling with anything, just to take it day by day and to try and just live life a little bit and enjoy life as it's been presented to you.
That's really powerful. It almost makes me think of like what children teach us, but like you embraced that even before your daughter arrived. Children really teach us like all we have is, I feel like they're always kind of in the present moment. They're never like, what time is dinner? Or like, where are we going tomorrow? They're really like in the present moment. And, they are learning through their senses. So there is this like, oh, look at the sunshine, or look at this blade of grass, or I like this food, or I don't like this food. And I mean, I think that it just sounds like a really big connection to, what it would mean to be like a good parent even, right? Like to be able to get to that place. And it's crazy the world we live in, how much it does encourage us to be living for tomorrow and chasing goals. And then, I'm guilty of it too, where I've chased a goal, I've caught it, but because I didn't know how to stop and actually appreciate it, like I would just keep on zipping to the next one without any sort of celebration for really what I achieved.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can say that's happened a time or two as well.
That's really good advice. I feel like that's good advice for like, yeah, anybody going through anything, that presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're doing good now. How old is Abigail?
Abby is 2 years and 4 months. We're doing amazing. We're living life to the fullest with a toddler.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
And before we kind of sign off, if people want to see some of the work you're doing, where can they find you?
I am actually on the board for a gala for Empty Arms. It's a cause that's close to my heart. It's for anyone who has lost a child at any stage during pregnancy or after pregnancy as well, up to the age of 12. They're an organization that supports basically anything that you need through your grieving process. They'll connect you with grief counselors. They'll connect you to resources in the community. And they've been in Saskatoon for quite some time, and they're establishing themselves across the province. So that organization is called Empty Arms.
Okay, awesome. And do they have a website?
They do. I think I don't want to say for certain whether it's .com or .org. I honestly feel like it's .org. But if you're okay with me giving you that information, and then we can just post it.
I will link it. I'll link it to the podcast. So if you look in the notes below, you'll see all Rae-Ann's info for Empty Arms. And yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing, because I know that that's a sometimes like difficult journey to talk about. And I think it's an important story, especially when, you tie it into like, it wasn't just about pursuing like the medical reasoning, there was this sort of spiritual component that almost needed to be addressed, that maybe that's not the traditional place that we look for answers. So I really wanted to say thank you for sharing that, because it's a difficult journey. So thank you.
Of course. And thank you for creating the space to be able to talk about it.
Yay. Well, thank you so much. And
thank you.
So we'll be chatting soon.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.